When you go to cut fabric, what's your tool of choice? Seems like an odd question, right? Because surely scissors. I mean, what else would you use? But see, there's an alternative tool, the Rotary Cutter. And it's not just useful for cutting in straight lines, it has lots of different tips and tricks up its sleeve. So I'm going to go through with you a few little things that you can do to get the most out of your Rotary Cutter. So the first thing you're going to do is discard that chair. You can't use a Rotary Cutter sat. You just don't have the leverage. You need to be above things. If your table's slightly too high, you're not going to get above it as well. It's going to be the best because you want to apply a bit of downward pressure, and that's going to make sure you get a really nice clean cut. Next thing you're going to do is, if you're looking for straight lines, grab yourself some sort of straight edge. I say straight edge because rulers come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. Mine is a Pattern Master. It's my favourite ruler of choice, but any sort of ruler or straight edge is going to do the job that you need. And the next thing sounds really obvious, but just in case it's not, you're going to need some sort of cutting mat, especially if you like your table. The other thing that a board is going to do for you is it's going to give you some measurements that are going to make it much, much easier to get your nice square edges and nice corners. I'm going to place my ruler down here, so that it's running along the same line front and back of my fabric. That way I know that I'm always working on something square. You are then going to push this lever on this particular Rotary Cutter, and that's going to unveil the blade so that you're ready to cut. And then I'm going to drag it over to the blade. If you try and just go straight down, you're either going to end up on the ruler cutting the plastic. I've done it way more times than I care to admit. Or you're going to end up a little far out, and it's just a really good way of doing it. It's just to drag yourself over to the ruler, ready to send it down. And that's it. On a nice sharp blade, that is as simple as it's going to be. So I'll line it up again, give myself a 1/2 inch strip and drag it over, send it down. Perfect. Every time. When it doesn't cut perfectly every time, you need a new blade. They're really easy to buy. They're not particularly expensive. It's way cheaper than buying a new pair of scissors every time they go blunt. So from that perspective, it's absolutely brilliant. If you're worried about the accuracy of your rotary cutting, one thing that's a really good idea to do is to always put the ruler over the bit of the fabric you want to keep to protect it. So if I'm talking about making a square, we will straighten off this edge here. And you see I'm cutting away the bit I don't want. So put that down there. Don't want that bit. And I've protected the piece I do want with the ruler. So if I now rotate this round and go, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, place my ruler down. That's going to give me my 5-inch square. And you see the ruler is over the top of the square. This means that provided I'm applying this downward force onto my ruler, however I feel comfortable doing so, I'm not going to end up cutting into it if I go a bit stray, as I would if I was using this bit. And there you have it, really nice and simple. You can see how beautifully square it is, nice and sharp. The other thing I find with the rotary cutter is I find it's far less likely to fray because they're so sharp when you're using a nice clean blade. So there's the first thing. The next thing that always seems to scupper people is curves. Can you cut a curve with a rotary cutter? Of course you can. This is just a bit of a sleeve pattern, and I'm just going to cut some of it out. You can see here it's got this lovely nice curve here. And the first thing you're going to notice is I've got some of these. These are just pattern weights. It's instead of pins, it's going to hold everything down in place. Now, I can't use the ruler because none of this is straight. So the ruler's not going to help me in the slightest. So all I'm going to do is hold my pattern in place, and I'm going to apply this slight downward force, following this line as best as I can. Remembering that, are you 100% accurate when you use your scissors? Probably not. Work my way along, and you end up with this lovely curve. It's just about taking your time. You'll notice I was a lot slower on that than I was with the straight lines. With the ruler, I'm a lot more confident. I'm like, nah, I know this ruler's going to hold me in the right spot, and I'm going to go for that. But curves are totally doable. In that sense, it's quicker because you're not having to put pins in. Your pattern weights are going to hold everything still. The only time that I find it's quite difficult is when my pattern piece is larger than my board. But if you've got a really big table, buy a really big board, and then that's going to become a lot less of a problem for you. You can also pop a few pins in, and that will mean that you can move your fabric to manipulate the bit you're working on onto the board. And there is rotary cutting. They come in lots of different shapes, sizes, descriptions. You get lots of different types of blades that you can put on, again in lots of different sizes. You can even get pinking shear blades for some rotary cutters. So it's definitely worth investigating and giving one a try.